Thank you very much for this invitation to this great event. I feel very honored to be here. I'm very glad that there are a lot of students here. Can you show your hands if you're a student? Quite a few. That's great. I think it's important to focus on the theme of this conference, which I paid very much attention to, called the future of the past. I think it's important because I feel a kinship from being from Thailand with all our brothers and sisters in ASEAN, because I feel we share a common history. And I think we're going through the same challenges, especially in terms of architecture and development, of trying to find ourselves. And it shows in the previous two great presentations we had on edible gardens and on cultural heredity, how our generation now, especially the young generation, are starting to question and wanting to find authenticity in life, and I think in architecture, because right now we're being bombarded by a local community from design websites like Dezeen and Architizer showing us spectacular architecture every other 5 minutes, and it's confusing as an architect, as a practicing architect, and as a student to do something that you feel good about that isn't following world trends. And what is more important is actually creating something of value for Malaysia, for Kuching. Because we don't want this city to be like any other city in Southeast Asia or in any other developing nation, which is a problem we have right now in terms of architecture. I think that's one of the concerns that I have when I started doing what I'm doing now. I do research on top of design. I don't do research because I'm academic or I try to be intellectual. I do research because I feel like I don't have enough knowledge about my local architecture in order to build an authentic vocabulary where I can design something that is of value for Thailand. So, there's a lot of information on historical Thai architecture in Thailand. Historic temples, old Thai houses on stilts, similar typologies that we have, but they're not usable in this day and age, and that's why I started researching Bangkok bastards. So let me tell you what Bangkok bastards are. Bangkok, well, that's my home, my lab. I love working in Bangkok. It's a crazy place, and it gives me inspiration, and so it's my laboratory. It's a place I want to study inside and out, in terms of culture, in terms of architecture. Bastard is another thing I have to explain. Well, if you look at the definition of bastard, it's an offspring with an unknown parent, right? So you're not so sure where the mother and father came from. Well, you know where the mother came from, you don't know where the father came from. So on top of that, it's an insult, right? You're a bastard. That's an insult, okay? So the reason I adopted this name for the subjects that I'm studying, which I call bastard buildings, they're basically buildings that most Thai people, look down upon when they walk through the city. They're usually called slums or shanties or kind of the dregs of the earth. So these are the things I find very, very interesting and very authentic. So a bastard building, the ones that I'll show you, are very authentic urban vernacular architecture that I'm sure once you look at them, you'll see similarities all around you here as well. This is one of them. This is a construction worker house. And I'm not sure if it is similar to here in Malaysia, it is in Thailand. Do construction workers live on site in Malaysia?
Yeah.
Yes, so we have that in common. I find this building type to be extremely inspiring in terms of the life that you see of the kind of the authentic nature of these buildings and the way they're built. And as you know, they're built by the people who live, the construction workers who live inside the houses themselves, right? And I feel like there are lessons to be learned with these very homegrown architectures that we can bring to our table to create a more authentic and locally sensitive architecture. Even though they're smelly, dirty, and messy, that's not the point. If we dig in deeper into them, you'll find there's so much more knowledge that's embedded within them. So I started to give these Bangkok bastards, on top of photographing them, kind of their due respect. I started to analyze them, measure them, document them. For example, this construction worker house, basically if you break it down, it just consists of this core unit, which are very small rooms that are very tight, hot, and very uncomfortable. But the fact that they're small and cramped forces the people who live in them to build the scaffolding, right? There's usually a circulation framework that wraps around and becomes a veranda shaded from sun and rain that becomes a space for eating, drinking, playing cards, napping, fighting, arguing, doing laundry. It becomes a kind of a scaffolding for life. And once you get to know this type of architecture better, this is another construction worker house on the same site as the first one I saw, but this one faces the Klong, or the canal in the back. And you can see that the scaffolding has been transformed, not only as a veranda, but also a canopy to protect the house from falling debris, right? So the workers have transformed, hybridized scaffolding to become a protective helmet on top. This beautiful one, when I went on site, the builder, the contractor ran out and said, "What are you doing? Are you photographing this? This is my baby. I'm gonna have it copyrighted, so please don't reproduce it," because he was very proud of this one. And I think it's beautiful. I said, "You should, because it's great." But this one is different. This one has rooms on the outside, and the scaffolding is actually a double-loaded corridor. Oops, sorry. Right? That people come out and work on this kind of wind tunnel and eat and cook and all that in this particular space. So you see how the scaffolding gets manipulated and changed. So this modular unit can become multiplied and becomes housing units, right? You really redefine what a wall is and what a door is, so you kind of unbutton your door to go inside. And because the workers and a lot of local Thai people don't have furniture, they sit on the floor, you can just peel up the window and let the light come in. So these are the lessons that I learned from these beautiful bastards, which I call. And because I talk to a lot of students and young people, there's an epidemic right now, and I think it's brought on by modern architecture that really comes from the West, that you have to do a spectacular elevation, you have to do spectacular forms. And I think that comes about because we're always taught to look at architecture as a two-dimensional image. And we forget to think about life and time scale, how a really simple structure can actually look mundane and regular on paper, but it can actually accommodate life. And so I had to think of a new way to represent architecture that would show that. So I did an animation with a local Thai funk band providing the music. So I'll let you know. I'll let you see for yourself. Go ahead. So this is 24 hours in the day of a construction worker house. There's no sound. Sorry. Hold on. You can start again. We can start again if you want. Okay. So we animated the band members as well. They're kind of bastards as well in the most positive sense. Two musicians are from Europe. They're kind of funk musicians, and the other two are local Thai musicians playing local instruments. So this shows the life of a construction worker house where not only the workers work there, but actually their families, grandma, kids. So you just saw the son leaving for school in a pickup taxi. And during the day, grandma is cooking for the family, waiting for, this one is playing hooky, not going to work. So all life is happening on the construction worker house while work is going on. construction site in the back. And it felt like I wanted to show this very simple structure and how it could accommodate life through time, which I think is an important lesson for us to remember about architecture. It really isn't just about form making. And here the pickup grocery truck comes by every 11 a.m. to sell vegetables and meats. To me, all these components are architecture. It isn't just walls and floors and columns and beams. So at around closing time of work, all the illegal products come out because they know all the construction workers are leaving work. So you get your imitation Nike caps, your great. So that was one of the first research I did. I started to document kind of the components of a construction worker house. And the more research I did, the more I felt like I needed to develop the way I recorded them. So this next project is called the Samsan Flood Canal Community. It's actually kind of a semi-legal shanty town that's built on top of a flood canal, but also topped on top by a freeway. So it's this community that's tucked within infrastructure in Bangkok. So on top of diagramming them, this time we actually went in and really wanted to study in detail the architecture. Sorry. Oh, there's an image that's not. That image not showing? That's okay. Yes, okay. So, our team, consisting of both architects as well as student interns, go in and measure not only the walls and the doors and the windows, but also the pillows, the benches, the potted plants, even the garbage in the water, which I feel are all these little components, especially in Southeast Asia, craft space. It isn't just walls, it isn't just architectural components that we learn in school, but all these minor elements make an impact on creating space. And I needed to draw in a way that conveyed that as well, and to teach myself. And the deeper you get into it, you start to realize that kind of the organic growth and urbanism that happens. For example, these small little alleyways that are circulation spaces become outdoor living rooms. Similar to the construction worker house, where the small cramped rooms are very hot, so they're forced to come out and live on the paths, on the construction, on the circulation paths and the pathways, and they become public spaces where people meet and talk and eat. Pots and pans and butane containers, cats, hangers, garbage, they're all architecture. They tell a story. So this little space is very significant in this community, right? And photographing it helps me understand it, but drawing it, measuring it, and talking to people makes me understand it much more in a way that I can use it in design in a meaningful way, where it's not superficial. That's why I think research is very important for us to really look all around us and really record and analyze the things that are around us, rather than going on the website and looking spectacular buildings on Design or Architizer. There's so much inspiration all around you. to the point where we look at the tectonics and the construction techniques of these shanty towns as well to see how leftover wood and lumber and steel members, even old telephone poles, can be hacked and transformed into new tectonics. This one that the shantytown uses, I call face joints, where it's the opposite of Japanese joinery, where you make mortise and tenon very carefully fitted to one another. They're slapped, the faces are slapped on top of each other, and they just nail them in, because in another 3 months they may have to reconstruct everything or pull everything apart because the cops may come or the floods may come. So it's a very immediate, temporal type of architecture that I think we can learn from. And going back to the idea of the future of the past, right? This is a typical, a photograph from about 95 years ago on the main river, the Chao Phraya River in Bangkok. And I'm sure you have architecture in Malaysia that is very similar in DNA to our local vernacular, where there are wooden houses, gabled pitches, veranda living. It's not, to me, it's not too different from what we call slums and shanties that we see in our towns. But the materials have changed, because wood was plentiful back then, right? It was cheap. Now it's very expensive in Thailand, so that other scavenged materials like corrugated, leftover lumber, cement fiberboard become the material of choice. So the future and the past are really the same, right? Except we don't accept this as vernacular right now. We think that they're slums because poor people live in them. But we didn't think about it that way. Now, for people who lived there 90 years ago, it becomes beautiful and nostalgic. So we really have to think about our point of view of what value in architecture we create. And so I wanted to make a contrast between what I saw in the life that is conveyed in structures like this compared to what the dream is for a middle-income person in Thailand or Southeast Asia right now. The sign of success is to kind of buy a typical developer home with a detached home with your surrounding garden, right? So this has been the dream, and it's been very much influenced by the West. But it brings about a point and a problem that is very significant in Thailand, because once you have a detached dwelling like this, what inevitably follows is a streetscape like this. I'm sure there is a street like this in this area. So if you have a detached dwelling or your own home, right, rather than shop houses, which is the old vernacular, what happens is you have to erect a wall, right? Because everybody's afraid of burglars in Southeast Asia, correct? Is that common here? Have you seen this here? Okay. So we don't know what we bought into. By doing the detached home, bring it across the ocean into our country, because we have, in Thailand at least, a lack of zoning, where this house could be next to a busy street, we have to erect this 2 to 3 meter high concrete block wall, blank, that kills street life. So one of my first projects, I tried to identify how we could create a new type of perimeter wall suburban house that actually brings life back to the street. So this is a project called Sala Arya. It's a yoga school / house, private residence. And it's in this very funky neighborhood. It's quote unquote a gated community with a lot of detached dwellings, but for some reason, as things in Thailand always happens, the law becomes ignored a little bit. So rather than all residentials, little programs like wedding salons, convenience stores, spas, cafes, cuckoo clock shops, pubs, and restaurants start to creep in. But in the end, it makes for a great mixed-use community, right? And the client, a friend of mine, is a yoga instructor who lives in a rental home in the same community right now. And her house is a little bit too small to cram in all the yoga students who are actually housewives or members of that community who actually walk to her house to learn yoga. Another component is her mother, the client's mother, who has Parkinson's disease and is kind of confined to a wheelchair. But the great story that happens is that whenever there is a yoga studio, mom comes, is ripped from her iPad watching Thai soap operas, and is willing to come and exercise with the class, so it always helps. So this house, the plot, is right next to this kind of flood reservoir. So it's an important connection between the street and the nature and the water. So the house itself, or the house/school, is organized in kind of a unique way. It takes the lesson of the soy, or the path, as the main kind of protagonist of the architecture. So that the house itself isn't just the volume or the architecture itself. It's actually a small alley that pulls the community into the heart of the house and to the water. So and this space becomes kind of an informal open-air multi-purpose space, which you'll see. I'll show you. So this is a model where these two volumes kind of define this gap in the house and leads you to the water. And at the end, these two volumes kind of, their heads shoot up to become the master bedroom and the guest bedroom. So in plan, went away. Okay, so you can see how in plan, the house is actually, when the gates are thrown open, becomes an extension of the street and becomes an extension of the neighborhood, where the yoga students can come in and practice in this central space. And in section, the central space is a void, and it's only covered by a large roof. And depending on the time of day, for example, in the morning, where the sun is coming in from the water, the students practice yoga on this side of the court, so that the roof throws a shadow onto the yoga area. And in the afternoon, when the sun is coming from the front of the house, the yoga students move to the water so that the roof blocks the sun. And during the rain, they can just move indoors where it's covered. The material is very important, and I'll go into it briefly later. I call it a bastard tile brick material that we invented for this project, that becomes a lining on the street wall and then pulls you in into the house as a lining. So this is the space itself. This space becomes almost a wind tunnel where there's constant airflow movement and there's no air conditioning required. And during the rain, let's say, you can move indoors underneath the covering to practice yoga. An important element is, and then once you go up into the bedrooms, the views open to the back, and this is the deck that opens to the river in the back. This is a scenario where, in terms of the private residence into the yoga school, so there's always a switching of public and private in this house. Inside, we also like to use scavenged materials for our projects. For example, we use these reclaimed shutters, saved from an old school. I'll show you later. And having these windows on the bedrooms that look into the central space create an indoor-outdoor feeling that kind of blurs the exterior-interior conditions of the central void. So these are the shutters that we found in northern Thailand. They're all teak, and they were very cheap, about $12 per panel. We bought all 33 of them that were saved from an elementary school. And I think, for me, cultural meaning in materials is really important. Because I think all architecture has a memory, has the ability to have a collective memory. For example, if you're a Thai person and you see those mint green shutters, you know that they came from a school like this, because that's part of our heritage, because our elementary schools in the countryside used to be painted in this green and always have these shutters. Okay. On top of that, the owner herself is actually kind of an American Thai hybrid herself. She was raised in America but moved to Thailand. And in her mind, because she was creating a yoga school, she always had this image and wanted to use brick, because in America, the little red brick school is kind of the typical image of an elementary school. And the fact that we are able to combine these two kind of symbolic images, cultural images of school of two countries into one architecture, I think is interesting. And I think it's important. You may not understand it, but I feel like expressing it is important, so that there's an inherent, sometimes hidden DNA in architecture that can carry your memory of the place, even though sometimes it's hybrid. Oh, and also, I have to tell you about another funny story. In Thailand, we always have to deal with catastrophes that are not expected during construction. I'm sure that happens here. There's always unexpected things that happen. For example, these bricks, these local simple bricks that we ordered, were supposed to be about 12 centimeters long. And when we paid the deposit and half of the shipment came to our house, they wound up to be about 9.5 centimeters long. And I asked the brick supplier, what happened with the bricks? And he said, oh, a little bit of shrinking. I said, shrinking? How can a brick shrink 3 centimeters? And that was the end of that. We already paid our deposit. So we're left with the dilemma of these smaller bricks. So when you have smaller bricks, what happens is you can't cover the whole wall if you have bricks that are shorter by 25%. So it means we were missing bricks with the money we already paid. And so I said, oh my gosh, I don't want to go over budget. What do we do? And I always work with the craftsman and the contractor, and this is our craftsman, Chang Nu. Chang Nu said, oh, Kun Chat, don't worry, I have a solution. I'm gonna chop your brick in half. Because you see, I chop it like an iPhone right here. Then I chop it like a popsicle here, okay? So he chopped 15,000 pieces of bricks in 3 days on his table saw. And the result was we saved almost 1 million baht, because if it were a regular brick, we'd have to construct a steel scaffolding to carry the weight. But now that we've chopped the brick in half and turned it into a bastard tile brick, we can apply it with mortar and epoxy. And in doing that, it allows us to create a new language, right? We're able to create these patterns that are completely two-dimensional and superficial, not load-bearing, right? So I feel like it's very Thai, because Thais are very superficial in the most positive way, right? And then, but with the superficiality, it doesn't mean that it's not meaningful. Each pattern conveys parts of the interiors truthfully. For example, this is a mom's bedroom, so that this pattern conveys the writing table at the wheelchair level. This is the bathroom. This is the window zone, right? So these patterns, the mistakes that we had to solve, create a new language so that we could create a new local Thai bastard architecture. So that was the wall we just saw. And again, the interface with the street is very important. How the perimeter wall house doesn't block itself from the street all the time. So we bought these, this is a computer rendering, we bought these old doors, salvaged them from old Thai house in Chiang Mai, northern Thailand. And it can be thrown open so that the house opens up to the community. And this is taken just last month. Our builders went further because we had leftover tile bricks. Remember the popsicle sticks? he chopped them again into quarters, almost like ice cubes, and said, "Oh, this is my ice cube wall for you." It's beautiful. And then he recombined some other bricks. He said, "Oh, I want to make CMU, a new type of CMU." I said, "What?" So the bricks he had, he remortared them into blocks and stacked them in a new way. Right, so I feel like invention doesn't have to come at the studio desk. It could happen on site. And so for me, this little alley and our own alley isn't so different from one another, right? So this is where research starts to inform design and vice versa. I'll go through this very quickly. Am I doing okay on time? Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna do a quick pass at a hotel we finished about 7 years ago to introduce you to another hotel. But this is a Nanda Heritage Hotel. It's a hotel that, a 3-star hotel that the client asked us to do a boutique hotel at that time. And I just shot back and said, I don't know what a boutique hotel is. People use that word all the time. But what I do know that what a good hotel is that it makes you feel the spirit of the place. It kind of brings out the local character of that place. And this site is really interesting because it's at the connection between the new city and the old city. So the site is like a knuckle in between this very high-speed, almost freeway-like street that leads to a bridge across the river. But in the back, it's a 100-year-old shanty town. Shanty towns that most Thais don't walk into because they think they're slums, but there's very much beauty in there. So we built this model. We never built a model of the project itself. We always built the context. So we built the shanty town in back, and this is the street in front. And the shanty town, again, are full of these wonderful paths, almost like a labyrinth. And you see that they use scavenged materials, old tarp, old siding, and to create public spaces in the in-between spaces. And as you can see in this model, we built the shanty town in wood, but also lined the courtyard in wood of the building. So the building itself is actually a shell where the living units kind of protect this inner secret court, right, that you access through a tunnel. And having learned the lessons from the locals, we try to reuse everything and not to create a sense of memory. So during design development, the owner came to us and said, Chat, we have this old house that I grew up in. So it's my childhood home. It's a beautiful, like a 95-year-old teak wood house in Bangkok. And he said that he was gonna sell this to get money to put into the hotel. And he said, no, don't sell it. Let me have your house. Because I want to reuse it to tell the story of this hotel that's going to be called the Nanda Heritage Hotel, informing us of the heritage of the family. And so we went and surveyed the house, every single piece, from ventilation panels, doors and windows, floorboards, railings, everything. We used everything and recombined it into a new core and inserted it into the courtyard. So as you see here, the building is a bastard in that it does many things. Kind of the dark, simple concrete frame portion is 7 stories high in the front. It acts almost like a billboard with these speed lines that are inspired by the telephone wires. But they kind of create a big presence on the street so that when you're zooming down fast on a car, the building gets your attention. But at the same time, the recycled wood is used to create a smaller building within the bigger building that kind of operates at the pedestrian scale. And it has a tunnel that kind of pulls you inside. So this, what I call the pinched opening, allows you to kind of have a sneak peek that there's an outdoor public area in the center of the building. In the center of the building, but that's kind of that's protected from the pollution and the noise. So as you go through, you can see all the wooden elements from the house are kind of reframed as artifacts. They're reframed as artifacts in these kind of slim steel panels, steel plate. And at a certain point, in the courtyard, can you hear me? Yeah. So in the courtyard, in the back as well, the building dips down to two levels, and I tried to frame the shantytown in back, as well as the neighbor's mango tree garden, so that even though you're inside the hotel courtyard, you're aware that you're a part of the bigger picture, part of the shantytown. And so we not only work on the programming of the hotel itself, how it can be a place for community. For example, this is almost every 2 weeks, there's an event inside the courtyard of the hotel. For example, this one was done in 2017, where a lot of Thai friends, designers, we would get together and show projects to each other of failed and canceled projects where the customers cheated us. Just kidding. No. Which is about 90% of all our work. But the interesting thing is, while we were doing this slideshow, the guests would pull up a chair on the balconies and participate and look, so that the hotel isn't just about tourists, it's about where locals and tourists meet as a community. So this project is usually is longer, but I wanted to preface it to a new project that we're doing. So while I was working on this project, which took a very long time because there were various political and natural disasters that happened at that time, while I was visiting the job site and thinking I was pretty special in creating this building with a tunnel of a pitched opening to create the secret courtyard, I found not too far down the street another building with a tunnel. And then a little bit further down, another building with a tunnel. And then another building. And then I discovered what my next research was the Curtain Sex Motel. So those were similar types of openings that open to a different. The surprise comes in at the other end of the tunnel as you emerge onto this interior street or interior court, right? Which is very unusual for an urban building to have a void and a courtyard in the middle. And then once you emerge in your car, an attendant would flag you through into your own particular spot. And he would run in and pull the curtain shut, right? And then you have your own secret room at the end of the parking spot. And then you go in and do your thing for 5 to 12 minutes, right? And then there's a secret exit out the alley on the side so that you don't run into your wife or your husband, if I'm being PC, who's waiting at the front. So an architect thought about this. Think about it. This is better than Architizer or Design, right? And so I diagrammed it, right? So you go through here, you do your thing, and then you go out that way. And then we want to revisit it more, so these are drawings we just did for a magazine just last month to really convey this space on the ground level where you go in and these red curtains really did shape and define space. And then we had fun with this section. You can zoom in on it on our website later. There are a lot of situations going on in there. I did an animation, which it's kind of X-rated, that we showed it in China and the police came and shut it down. Do we have time to show it? I knew what the answer was anyway, I just asked to be polite. Okay, let's show it. Wow. It tells a story of this pathetic man who tells his wife that he's going to exercise. He doesn't go in his car, he walks there, so he's a modern man. kids have to close their eyes. We spent a whole night with the animator thinking of the different scenarios. When we showed this at an exhibition in Japanese, all the Japanese housewives gathered around the screen. They wouldn't go anywhere. I think it's good. He gets away with it and does the same thing later. So what I just showed you, the research that I did on this hotel that we analyzed is, that hotel was called the Picnic Hotel. All these current sex motels have the most innocent names, like Happiness and Picnic and Clouds. And that hotel was owned by this interesting gentleman called Papa Tony. He's kind of a small-time mafiosa. Every time I ask him where he gets his money, he tells me not to ask that question. So I don't ever ask again. But at first, about 5 years ago, we had the option of me redesigning that hotel or for adaptive reuse. But unfortunately, it was demolished. I was very sad. It was one of the, you have your heartbreaks of the projects you really want, and that was one of my heartbreaks. Papa Tony felt bad. But about 4 years later, Papa Tony called me and said, "Oh, don't worry, I bought another sex motel. You can renovate." So this one we actually are almost about to finish, but we're gonna do it as a regular hotel and a hostel. But you can have sex in it. Nobody says you can't. So this current sex motel is actually close to the Nanda Heritage Hotel. So it has this mask. I forgot to tell you that another interesting thing about the current sex motel is, I think it's worth mentioning, because I think architectural language is really important. Sorry. Remember the first pictures I showed you of this facade, right? We've seen this before. It's called like brise soleil, right? Corbusier. These concrete fins that block out the sun. You have to calculate the angle and stuff like that. But you notice there are hardly any windows here? There are no windows. So it's like a psychological mask that makes you not remember this place to protect the privacy of the guests, right? I think it's really important to understand, to kind of note things like that. This new hotel didn't have as nice a facade, but it has that's Papa Tony. Isn't that cool? So Papa Tony, I mean, he's kind of a big player in one of the neighborhoods in Thailand. And he actually started off just as a street vendor selling Thai coffee. And he saved enough money to buy a taxi and kind of built, it was a self-made man, and eventually acquired a whole kingdom of massage parlors and current sex motels. So this is the new hotel site, right? It's a U-shaped building. It has a prototypical tunnel, right? And then as you go in, there's the internal courtyard, but the space isn't as nice as the first hotel. So what we did, we actually had to blow out a part of the second, the living rooms here to make a larger space, void. The problem with a lot of these hotels is the rooms are very small. This one was about 3 meters by 3 meters. So basically, there's not much you do in there, so you don't need that much space. So Papa Tony said, I don't care what you do, chat. I just need for you to make me a room so that it can sleep 3 people. That's how I get my extra income, right? And so what I showed him this. I said, you can put him here. Which is literally what we did. Because of budget constraints, we actually just created an extrusion of a daybed, 1.4 meter into the elevation, and kept the entire building as the same. But this one particular extrusion changed the face of the building, so that each room has these windows to the city, I call them, where you can sleep, you can use them as a daybed, and from the street you look up and you see people working on their iPhones or iPads, and it becomes a face for the hotel. And so if this were the building stripped down to its bare structure, this new extrusion is the intervention of the building, right? So these are all the pop-out beds. And so lessons I learned from looking at the vernacular of the bastards, I wanted to utilize the idea of the scaffolding. Basically, to turn a building that used to be private, turned it on itself, and very mysterious, into something that opened up to the street and created value to the public. So the scaffolding is divided into 3 components. There's a porch component, there's an alley component, and there's a theater component. I'll tell you what these ones mean. So the alley component is actually kind of a vertical path in the facade that winds back and forth within these pop-outs. And I basically want to solve a very basic problem. A lot of developers come to us and say, if we're going to do an apartment or a condominium for us, please put in really nice, cute balconies because they make the buildings look great. I don't know if you've ever had requests like that. But as you know, in a city, nobody ever uses a balcony, right? It becomes a place for air condensers. What else? Hanging laundry and other utilities, right? So, and the problem that happens with that is that if you have a problem with your air condenser unit, the repairman always has to go through your unit to go repair your AC unit on the balcony. So this path actually allows service repairmen to service all the condenser units and other MEP systems without going through the rooms. But it also has another public surprise function, which I'll show you later. The porch is actually kind of a veranda scaffolding. Again, this porch is related to Papa's kind of affinity for street food because he started off as a street vendor and he has kind of a soft spot for street food in Thailand, as I do as well. So we wanted to, this is actually a neighbor who's just on the alley that the hotel sits on. So this is the sausage man and his armada of sausages. And we work with him and other vendors close by to see how we can create a business model where instead of guests coming down and having the typical eggs and toast, the typical continental breakfast, why don't we send them out to eat Thai sausages or porridge or other Thai local food, and then we can help each other in terms of the business model, right? Which is the opposite of a lot of operators where when they see street vendors like this, they think, oh, it's very dirty, it's unhygienic, why don't we get them out so that we start with a clean slate? We think it's the opposite. We think we need to work with the neighborhood. So we start to do research on street food, which is great, and street food carts. Also, a couple of years ago, the military government wanted to adopt the model of Singapore and actually wanted to relocate all of the food carts into one centralized location, basically banning street food from Thailand. So if you go to Bangkok right now, about 50% of the street food carts are gone, which is a sad situation. So this project is meant to show that there's an alternative to banning street food from the neighborhood. And so the porch is basically a covered veranda, but it also involves all the mobile furniture that we've designed, as well as extra street carts that can be rolled out onto the alley to kind of take back the street. At times, this particular alley is closed off to traffic after 7 p.m., so we can roll the furniture out and kind of bring back life to the street. At certain times, the building has to be closed up after hotel hours so that the perimeter is protected from wanderers and stray dogs, but at certain times when it's open, the perimeter flips down to become a table that you can sit on the sidewalk to activate the street life. And remember the alley that I told you about? The service condensers. At night, it becomes a vertical stage for street performers. Oh, sorry. And then we still have the tunnel. So the front still has a tunnel that leads to the inner court, but before you get to the inner court, there's the lobby where all the furniture is kind of designed in a mobile cart language. And as you enter the courtyard, it has turned into a swimming pool, but it's more like a community room with benches on all sides. It's not a lap pool. And at night, we show movie. Because this harkens back to kind of rural Thai tradition of putting up canvas on temple grounds during festivals and watching outdoor movies. Another important thing is we redesigned a new type of balcony where you can actually slip your legs through and dangle your legs so that your face is turned to watch the movie, but also towards each other, right? So it's a balcony that forces you to look at your neighbor, and it makes this into kind of a community room. So this scaffolding inserts into the courtyard to create the outdoor theater. The last feature, there's a pulley system that brings popcorn up to your balcony while you watch a movie. So this scaffolding, this is during construction when the workers were hanging out, isn't so different from this scaffolding, I think. A feature of the past. They're one and the same. So here's some construction, actual construction shots. 10 minutes, all right, we can do it 10 minutes. Right. These are taken last month. So this will be open in May. Please come. Last one. This is a project I haven't shown before because it just opened, so it's the first time I've shown it to the public. It's one of our first projects outside of Bangkok, called A Bastard in the Mountains. It's in this resort, it's near a national park called Khao Yai, or Big Mountain. And an unusual phenomenon has happened in the area outside of Khao Yai, which I think happens in a lot of developing countries in terms of resort architecture. It's turned into Europe. So we have a resort called Thames Valley, which is a kind of a British reproduction. We have Palio, which is kind of a Tuscany hill town. We even have our own Leaning Tower of Pisa in Toscano Valley, a Singaporean development nearby with air conditioners on the back. So this is the situation of Khao Yai, or a big mountain resort town that we're faced with right now. And it's our site to build a new resort. On top of that, the client, who's a really great person and with great taste, showed me this picture. She said, "I love the wizarding world of Harry Potter." What do you do when a client shows you Harry Potter, right? So that's the dilemma we had, because, listen, we're taught to think like architects, to say that I can't do that. My professor would never allow me to do that. That's bad taste, that's Disneyland. But in the end,
I love Harry Potter. What's wrong with Harry Potter, right? So there's this dilemma, you're always, why do we have to choose between the two? Is there a reality, that can be made to accommodate both? The last element is, the client said, I want a maze in the hotel. I said, okay, a maze. That's not so culturally linked. I can work with that. So I told her, can we just say that we won't do this in any particular type of style and just say that it'll be magical? It'll be much easier. So that's what we worked with. And there was a lot of dilemma in my mind working on this project, but we'll see what happens. So in order to do this project, we actually thought of it as a storyboard, right? So this elongated site was divided into chapters, right? So working with a graphic artist and kind of a branding and marketing team, we came up with this idea of how this hotel is actually trying to do two things. It's trying to talk about how to preserve the natural wildlife in Khao Yai, which has really unique species of rabbits, deer, spotted lions, but doing it in a fun and creative way. So we imagine Hotel Labyrinth, the name came from labyrinth, as kind of a kingdom from these magical Khao Yai mountains, where the animals ruled in here. Okay? So it's divided into chapters. So these are the animals, which are derived from real wildlife in Big Mountain, and meant to teach the kids about wildlife. And the heart of the project is the hotel element itself, right here, where we tried to transform and bastardize how could a labyrinth transform a new type of a hotel in the mountains. So what happens is, I'll show you, you walk through, let me go through. So basically, again, I think having multiple narratives and talking about architecture is important. We can talk about how this is a storybook setting, it's kind of, like I told her, it's a castle with a void in the middle, like a courtyard for the priests and the monks, right? But in reality, these are shop house modules, 5-meter concrete frame structures. So they're very cheap. So what you do is you go through this void in the middle, right, to penetrate the wall. And then you enter kind of the open air lobby in the middle of the courtyard. And at the lobby, you're confronted with these kind of a hoard of drawers, kind of these mysterious doors, and you have your own drawer, which your own drawer will have your own map and key and kind of a welcoming kit, your magical horns. And then with the key, you have to go to the out perimeter wall. There's this exterior wall that has 48 different doors, each one leading to a different hotel room, right? So you walk through each door, right? And then you can either go through here to there, or here to there. So it's a combination of a labyrinth plus a hotel room, and trying to create a new type of experience in the mountains. So in doing so, if this were their diagram, right, where these are all the alleyways to different doors, what happens is we're able to create a new type of resort where this snake-like garden becomes the first part of the hotel room. So once you enter this door here, it's the beginning of your room experience. So you have your own secret garden that leads to your room, right? So we kind of blew up each unit. Each room has a new forecourt that's a garden that leads up to the room. And in doing so, you can have breakfast here. Because you come in through your door here, this is where the security is, right? And then you can have a little bench here or breakfast set up, and then you go into your room. So it extends your idea of the resort room. And then when you look back, the lobby of the lobby, the roof of the lobby itself becomes kind of a roof deck where at 4 p.m. we have live kind of string music, like music in the park. And again, I'll talking about how the architecture is actually a tool to frame the mountains. This is a drone shot from last month of how these lead to different rooms. Again, multiple layers in architecture is very important. And let's talk about, when we first saw these doors, we designed them out of our heads. But with me, every project has to be flexible. I'm never tied to any form at all, because I feel like picking up parts of culture and architecture and past and integrating them during the design and construction process is important. So while we were constructing these walls, we went and found 48 different salvaged doors from Thai homes. So they're very much historically linked. And so when we put them into this new setting, it creates a layer of memory that's both kind of global and local. Again, and I'll talk about how the language of the different styles of or the languages of architecture informs a new hybrid, even the Thai house. So this is a process collage that we did. Originally, before it was a tourist town, there were Thai houses on stilts. With the introduction of these various styles of languages, I gave them serious respect because they were made by us. We can't say that this is bad taste or good taste, but it becomes a part of the overall hybrid language. Not so different from what we call colonial architecture, right? All over Southeast Asia, where there are Western imports, Western forms of classical stone masonry building that were transported to Malaysia or Thailand and turned into wood architecture that would breathe. I don't think it's much of a stretch. But from that, we have this. On top of form, space is important, so that we're creating this new type of stone architecture, but it's tropical as well. So that these are the walkways, kind of our 5-foot way, to show that stone can be light and porous and actually have what I call the third space for tropical living. Almost done, last one. The last component is the Great Hall, which is in the back, it's the dining room. Again, derived from the Thai house. We thought about how a mountain chain of these Thai houses could create a new type of space, and we started to abstract them into a new architecture that is blurry, that also is a form that harkens to the past, but also frames the mountains. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chet.